Well, it's you. Thank you for being here. Jonathan Foust here. I am delighted to have this time with you. I'm going to be sharing a little bit meditation talk. I think this is a good talk. I think you'll find it helpful. It's got some classic stuff in it, which may be familiar, but nonetheless, I think it's helpful. So anyway, good to see you. Before we launch, some quick thank yous. First of all, a big thank you to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington, which hosts this, and to our producer, to Glenn Harrison, for making the streaming webcast thing happen. As well, I'd like to thank Rita Moran and Ray Manioki for helping to make this happen as well. Before the talk, we have guided mindful movement with Rita Moran, just to massage you into the right place for meditation and the talk. And afterward, we have this wonderful mindful dialogue group. Please feel free to join in. Those links are on my website and on my Facebook page. 6:30, mindful movement. 7:30, here we are. And then at around 8:40, we have mindful dialogue happening. So please do avail yourself. All this is offered free of charge. The whole idea here is that no one is denied access to these practices and teachings, and it's all done from a place of real enjoyment and love and gratitude. And if you feel inspired to help make this happen, thank you for your support. Really, really appreciate it. Well, I'd say without further ado, why don't we launch into this? We're going to be exploring this whole process of working with energy in the body as part of this series on embodied presence. What does it mean to be deeply in the body as the foundation of how you pay attention to life? So I think what we could do to prepare ourselves for that talk is to actually get in the body a little bit. So surprise, surprise. If you like, take a little bit of time just to sense how your body might like to move or stretch. You can close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, and let your body just stretch, do whatever it needs to do to get comfortable. The next thing is just to pay attention to your posture. Is there any particular way that would support you in paying attention? For some of us, that means maybe aligning your spine consciously, maybe sitting up a little bit straighter. It can be helpful to bring your back away from the back of your chair if you're sitting in a chair, or shove a pillow down to your sacrum to tilt the sacrum forward just a little bit. For others of us, if you're sitting up and you're feeling too tense, maybe relax a little bit. Just find that place where it's not too tight, not too loose, where you can naturally focus inward. If your eyes are closed, just notice and sense this inner world. It can be very helpful just to kind of acknowledge how you take in information. And one of the primary ways we take in information is through these sense doors. And it's very helpful sometimes to begin with the awareness of sound. Notice all the sounds 360 degrees right now. And you'll notice that you're aware of the sound vibrations, and then you're also aware of the cognizing process, the interpretation of the sound, where you give it a name, you sense its location, you determine whether it's safe or not, or if that sound is a threat. And just notice this natural process of the mind labeling, identifying location. And now notice, is it possible to experience the sound without a label, without naming it? Just to sense a little bit, if you can, just the pure vibration of the sounds. Notice as well now the perception of touch externally. The air against the skin, the clothes against your skin, the pressure points between your body and the floor or chair or cushion or bed. There's an internal perception of what we call felt sense. Just noticing if there's anywhere in particular that the mind would label unpleasant inside. Is there anything inside that your mind would label pleasant? Anything free-flowing, comfortable, easy? And acknowledging the neutral sensations. What do you feel when you turn your attention to this sense of smell? To your sense of taste? If your eyes are closed, to the perception of light beyond your closed eyes, or if your eyes are open, the perception of any visual imagery or stimulation. Now, if you like, or if you can you imagine all the sense doors, all these channels of perception of sense wide open? And sense how the brain is computing all this information to turn it into a narrative. And you might now, in your own time, let your attention begin to settle on one particular point of feeling or sensation. It might be the movement of the breath on the inside, or maybe the sound vibrations. And sense if you can cultivate a sense of foreground and background. The breath or the sounds in the foreground. And the perception of everything shifting in the background. Inevitably, you'll notice the mind coming in with a narrative, with a story, and perhaps noticing that your attention is hijacked by thought forms. When you notice this very natural process, just take a moment to pause and then redirect your attention. And you may notice when you feel this breath on the inside or these sound vibrations, there can be sometimes a re-arriving, a re-relaxing all through the body. Here and now. These sensations right at the point of contact with your anchor or your focal point. And you might just very gently sense that there is an object of concentration here, the breath or the sounds. And can you sense, if just for a moment, who you are as the one who is aware right now? The quality of the observer or the witness. And over the next minute or so, notice if it's possible to relax or soften even more inside. Could you soften the muscles of your face, the inside of your mouth, the palms, soles of the feet, the belly. And you might once again feel the breath, notice the sound vibrations, whatever your anchor may be. And is it possible now to soften even more right here at the point of contact? And to cultivate a sense of deep relaxation and a sense of receiving the sensations as they're happening. What is happening right now? What do you notice right now? Is it possible to let this be, to relax back even more to this sense of who you are as the witness, the observer? Perhaps even to let go of any effort. And in these final moments, just inquire, what could relax or soften right now? Awake to all the senses and at the same time, alert, allowing, and spacious. As you're ready, you can now deepen your breath. You might like to let your body move and stretch in any way that feels good, letting go of this technique, any technique whatsoever. Taking some time to stretch and to very gently begin your transition. Welcome back. Quite a few years ago, before mindfulness was kind of making its way into the schools, I was asked to put together this pilot for one of the more, shall we say, college prep high schools in the DC area. It was the number 1 or number 2 high school, and the kids were completely stressed out around pleasing their parents and getting into college. And a bunch of concerned parents asked me to put together a pilot program on managing stress for kids. And so I did a series, and it was really, really interesting. I haven't spent that much time with youth. And it was really interesting to sort of explore how to initiate conversations. And in fact, one of the really interesting things, and maybe where a lot of the most passion in our conversations was, I noticed that I came in with this whole idea of the different techniques I would teach. And the first meditation I led, the kids, so many of them just fell asleep. And one kid actually fell asleep back in one of those really uncomfortable high school chairs. And we talked about their depletion in their life, how little sleep they get, all the pressure they have. And I wanted to talk with them about identifying stress patterns. And I realized I couldn't really get them to talk about it directly. So I asked them about if they could identify how people in their family or close friends react to stress. And they were incredibly quick to identify. One kid said, my dad, he just gets angry and he yells. Another one said, my mom just gets quiet and she goes back to bed and she won't talk for days when she's stressed out. And one girl said, well, my brother just goes into his room and plays video games. And someone else said, my stepmom, I don't know what happens to her. She just gets hyperactive and she won't stop criticizing me and telling me what I should be doing. It really drives me crazy. So we talked about these stress patterns and how they show up. And then I kind of turned the tables and I said, well, what about you guys? What are your stress patterns? And the universal response was, oh, we're cool. What I'd like to talk about, part of these talks on embodied awareness, is how do we work with the patterns of stress, not only in the mind, but in the body. And the body is the mind is the body. What I'd like to talk about, and always depends on how much I yammer here, but I would like to talk about how the body really is the doorway to transformation. I'd like to talk about the weather systems of the mind and how they show up in the body. I'd like to talk some about what we could call riding the wave. How do you stay present to those waves of stress and dissatisfaction and unsteadiness that occur in life? How do you ride that in the body? And a little bit on what does it mean to actually be liberated, and awake, and detached in a healthy way in the body. So I think we have some acceptance of the idea that the body is the doorway, but more and more chronic right now, we see how we're not in our bodies at all. And if you want any proof for this, just go to YouTube and type in accidents when texting or being on your phone. And there are so many examples of people who are on their phones and walking in the fountains and walking in the glass doors or walking in the traffic. There's a series where they had someone in a gorilla suit reading the newspaper on the sidewalk while people walk by on their phones completely oblivious. And unfortunately, there's a lot of industry reports on accidents while walking and driving, and it's tragic, absolutely tragic. We are more and more disconnected from our bodies. Our heads are these portable, our bodies are these portable flesh units to move our head from one place to another. So just an interesting Zen pop quiz. If you like, you can close your eyes, and if you're driving or walking, and I'm talking to you, Craig, keep your eyes open. If you would, you can either raise your hand or just let your attention move into your hand. And take a moment and sense, could you relax your thumb? Could you relax your fingers? Can you feel any sensations on the back of your hand? Can you feel any sensations on the palm of your hand? And now bringing your attention inside, can you feel the space inside your thumb? Is it possible to feel the space between each of your fingers right now? And is it possible to relax so fully that you might begin to detect any subtle energy in the palms or fingers or thumb? Any vibration, any pulse, subtle energy? And it's this interesting thing. How utterly simple is this? That when you deeply feel on the inside, you may notice there's this quality of what we could call embodied presence. You become more aware of the life force, the pulse, the tingling, the prana, the chi, the ki that's animating your body. If you like, you can open your eyes if they're not already. How utterly simple. And it's almost this bifurcation. Either you are lost in the narrative, either you are completely and utterly in the narrative, the story of your life, or you are deeply present with the sensations that are happening in the present moment. One or the other. And this becomes the foundation of meditation practice, at least through this lens. Mindfulness of the body. Returning again and again and again, completely aware of the natural proliferation of the mental process, just the incessant manufacturing of thoughts and stories and narrative, this sense of the self telling an ongoing story, and the experience of here and now. And in some ways, when you come back to the body, it can almost feel like a samurai sword, just sort of cutting the narrative and coming back. A lot of people have described how we are utterly lost in thought, particularly in this culture. We are constantly future casting, anticipating what's next, looking through the lens of past. There's a great line in the Course of Miracles I love that says, it's an interesting thing to contemplate. All you see is the past. And that's deep. We won't take time to dive into that, but all you see is the past. That is to say, your mind is constantly referring back to the information that you had in the past when you built your operating system to interpret the present moment. When Tesla was putting together its software, one of the things they began to notice is that there were things the software didn't recognize as real. And one of them were the Amish buggies. So driving down the road and there's a horse and buggy, the software did not know what it was. It didn't exist in the consciousness of Tesla software. And so we're constantly taking in information and then building it in the present moment and then anticipating the future. So here's this life of the mind, which is compelling, exciting, terrifying, crazy. And then this teaching that everything you seek is found within. And that all of your memories, past and present, they all live within. And so, as I think I may have said before, the mind is constantly scanning for danger. It's designed to keep you alive. And that has a negativity bias to it. Anticipating danger and how to encounter it, prepare, make the bad stuff go away, cultivate the good stuff. But there's also something in there, maybe it's the prefrontal part of the prefrontal cortex or whatever, that's also scanning for what is true. Scanning for what is true. And how do we work with the challenges to being fully present? Because we have all experienced trauma to some degree. A simplistic way of thinking of trauma, but I think an effective way of thinking about trauma is fear and helplessness. When you feel anxiety and you feel overwhelmed, trauma. Lots of little traumas and sometimes some really big traumas. So I wanted to share a story about working with difficulty. This is many years ago, before I was really informed around trauma. I was leading a retreat. It was mostly a meditation retreat, but also some training and intuition and stuff like that. And there was this woman, kind of a younger woman on this retreat, who in the meditations would not close her eyes. This was a long time ago when I was a pretty new teacher and I really didn't know much about trauma at all. She wouldn't close her eyes. I was getting really annoyed. And I even stared her down a few times. I'm leading a meditation, her eyes are open, I'm making eye contact with her, letting her know that I see that her eyes aren't closed. Then she would close her eyes, then she would open them again. She was also incredibly argumentative whenever I would teach. She was challenging, and then it got back to me that in the community where I was teaching, she was going to other workshops and kind of getting into arguments and fights with other teachers. So I asked to meet with her, like on day 2 or day 3 of this retreat, and I said, I'm not sure this is the right program for you. From what I can tell, you're not really wanting to be here. And I found out that she, as she told me her story, she was a psychiatric nurse in a prison for the severely mentally ill. And it broke my heart. It just broke my heart that I didn't see her trauma and that I wasn't more skillful in helping her work with everything that she was holding inside. So we talked and I said, you might need something that's more energetic, maybe with yoga and walking outside, and that's not going to be as quite as challenging. And so we talked, and she actually decided to stay in the program, but we were both more sensitive to each other. And it really helped me and so informed me. So I share this story with you because the truth is, when you really open into embodied presence, it can most probably open you to everything that's undigested in your life. It will show up in the body and it will show up in the mind. You'll experience it as memories. You'll experience it as emotions. And you'll experience it in the felt sense, that is to say, how your body holds that experience. If you just think about today, just look back on today, how many thoughts have passed through your consciousness today? It's been said it's about 50,000 thoughts a day. How many emotions? How many times have you noticed your heart closing down, self-protective, opening, and getting expansive? How many weather systems have passed through? How many times were you able to be the observer, just watching what's happening? And how many times did you get sucked into reactivity? There's so much power in this practice of self-observation without judgment. That's really a key to freedom. Self-observation without judgment. To clearly recognize what's here without shutting down or making yourself small. when we can do this, which is not all the time, but it's a practice to, as I like to say, perhaps ad nauseum for you, to take the seat of the witness, to be the observer, you begin to recognize everything that's changing, these weather systems of the mind. There are 5 classic states that show up in the mind and in the body, and I wanted to review these. You may be familiar with these. Sometimes they're referred to as the hindrances or the defilements of the mind. To me, that's not such a helpful description, and for many years of my practice, I thought my job was to neutralize these 5 states so that I could get back to meditation. And only after many years did I recognize that these states actually are the path. The obstacles are the path. I'm not exactly sure what to call them now. I think growth opportunities is maybe a little too snarky. Limbic releases, maybe that. But these mental formations will show up in the body and they will show up in the mind. If you investigate and look closely, you will notice there is a corresponding relationship between what's happening in the mind and what's happening in the felt sense, how your nervous system holds that thought, feeling, mood, emotion. And these 5 states, and again, as I like to say, the good news is there are only 5. The bad news is they're pretty nefarious. A friend of mine was sitting in Asia. He did a retreat, and it was such a great retreat that he went back to do another retreat with expectations. And as you know, what happens with expectations, it was a very different retreat, and he could not settle. His mind was jumping all over the place, and he fought with his mind a lot. This caffeinated chipmunk of a mind would not settle, so he did focus and concentration practices of coming back again and again and again. He did slow motion walking meditation as a way to sort of bring himself back, but he was so deeply, deeply frustrated with how his mind was out of control. And he met with one of the teachers and he explained what's going on. And his teacher, as he reported, his teacher said, restlessness. This is also my greatest challenge. He said something shifted for him. He said once it was named, it sort of released. And he felt a deeper sense of peace and had more access to the present moment. Now to say that's rare. I can tell you just to name it, but it really is the first step in working with these states. Now, just a little preview. Back in my ashram days, we use this kind of concept a lot called riding the wave. It's been said that a pure emotion is about 90 seconds. If it's unfettered, allowed to fully express, it takes about 90 seconds. And of course, we can stretch that out. And I personally have managed to stretch out some of my emotions from about 90 seconds to like 45, 47 years because I'm resisting them. What happens is you're feeling equanimity. Everything's fine. And then there's this inner clench. The Tibetan traditions call it Shempa, the inner clench. Part of the inner clench is this sense that something's wrong. It's either something's wrong with me or something's wrong out there. And as soon as that happens, the mind, of course, begins to fixate on this something that's wrong, and you begin to feel it as an inner tension. And that inner tension sometimes will grow. And if you've ever gone through like an emotional wave where you feel like there's just something in your body that you just want to cry, strong emotion comes. It gets more and more and more intense. It's going to go to its crest. And then there's a crescendo, kind of a healing crisis. On the other side of that wave is a sense of release, a sense of something energetically has just sort of passed through. Sometimes there's a cognitive insight, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much I was holding on to that thought or that belief. But what happens a lot, if we can't ride the wave all the way through, we're very strategic at bailing, getting off the wave. You feel the intensity too much, and then you're gone. John Gray has this whole thing around relationships, somewhat oversimplified. But he said what happens is quite often in relationship, one person will be feeling something really intense, feeling a strong emotion, and they'll feel the wave begin to build. And just as it's building, right before it gets to the crest, the partner will jump in to try to fix it. They'll try to explain what's happening. They'll do something to kind of break this natural flow of the wave. And part of his advice is, when you're with someone who's feeling some strong emotion arise, wait 2 minutes. Just wait for 2 minutes. Let them ride that wave, and on the other side will be a sense of integration and also a very deep sense of gratitude that you didn't try to fix, but you simply offered presence. So what are these energies that occur? Two main energies that will show up is something will arise internally, and there will be a sense of repulsion. You want it to go away. And it will show up emotionally as anger, judgment, blame, ill will, hatred. You just want it to go away. And if you just make an internal posture of that, you're just wanting to push away, you can feel like that there's some form of a inner tension, some form of an inner clench, that you're tightening around whatever is there. Tightening, self-protection, pushing away. That's the energy of repulsion. Now, the opposite of that, of course, is the energy of attraction. This is the mind going into planning, going into fantasy, going into grasping, wanting. And here is this reaching. You're reaching for something that's not there. The pornographic meditations, and let's all admit it, going into sexual fantasy, the mind is just caught in this wondrous sense of wanting. And that has a mental quality, but also a physical quality inside. Another set of opposites are what we could think of as having too much energy. And this is the restlessness category. It's worry, it's hypervigilance. Mentally, the mind is going to be hopping around. Hypervigilance, what about this? What about that? Oh, here's this thought. Or it's caught in anticipation and anxiety. So it's running mental scenarios in an attempt to self-soothe, in an attempt to kind of control. But if you look beneath the mental process into the physical, into the energetic experience, you'll notice that there is a kind of an inner jumpiness. Probably your breath probably is really ragged and kind of uneven. And you'll notice that there is a sort of an inner tension, an inability to relax. Now, the opposite of that is too much energy is not enough energy. And this leads us to what's traditionally called sloth and torpor. It's the heaviness, it's the numbness, it's that sense of spiraling down into kind of a depressive state. Just not enough energy. Sometimes this sense of sloth and torpor is purely biological. You're tired, and now that you're listening to your body is saying, now that I have your attention, let me tell you what I need, and you're out. You're just drooling on your lap. Sometimes it's psycho-emotional. Something's coming up, you instinctively don't want to feel it, and you will check out. You'll go numb. Just a natural part of self-protection. It's just a self-protective pattern. So we have repulsion and attraction. We have too much energy and not enough energy, restlessness versus sloth and torpor. And then the next category is doubt. Doubt, and with that is sort of like the ruthless critic. And quite often this will bring in a feeling of paralysis. The mind is sort of paralyzed. Why am I can't do this. Why am I doing this? This practice doesn't work. Does this teacher know what he's talking about? You're mentally locked down and stuck. But you also may notice, if you bring your attention into the felt sense of the body, doubt has a feeling to it. There's nothing moving. So quite often when you're riding a wave, when you're feeling an emotion, or just that sense that something's wrong and you can feel it begin to build, it will build in intensity. If it's possible to stay with it, if you can breathe and relax and feel and stay curious and cultivate non-judging awareness, quite often that wave will crest. And again, as I said, on the other side, a weather system will have moved through. Or just a sense of release or relief, or again, sometimes an insight. The challenge, of course, is to be aware of your reactivity. When you can name, oh, this is judgment and ill will. This is pushing away. Oh, this is like wanting, planning. I'm just lost in this grasping for something. Or, oh my gosh, I'm really caught in worry and anxiety right now. Or, oh, this is sloth and torpor. Or just to name doubt can be super, super helpful. So here it's helpful just to mention the acronym of RAIN, which you're probably familiar with. The R is to recognize, just naming it. It can be very, very simple. And as it has been said, some thoughts are self-liberating. For my friend, just naming restlessness allowed it to give it room. Sometimes it's stickier. And so if one of these states is persistent, you can ask yourself, can I make room for it? Can I allow it? Can I accept it right now? And here, because we are in this practice of releasing what's between us and feeling free, this is such a critical question. To really ask yourself and listen to the felt sense of your body. Can I be with it right now? And your body might say, nope. Because the conditions have to be right. You're potentially releasing something. And the reason you're holding it inside is because it hasn't been okay to name it and let it go. Recently, I was exploring someone who was in contact with some really deep anger and rage. And we were doing kind of a somatic inquiry, and I asked, does it feel safe to be with it right now? And he said, nope. That's incredibly wise. You can't force, you can't push. But what you can do is let it know you see it. Let it know another time when the conditions are different. When you have more mindfulness, more non-judging awareness, more energy, more concentration, more curiosity. Maybe what you need is a facilitated situation. But you let it know another time. Incredibly skillful thing. So to recognize, to ask if you can allow, if you can accept, and then if you can, this is where the investigation comes. Way back when, I was sharing a quote from the Buddha that said, you can travel the world, every part of the world externally, and not find the deepest answers to your questions. It's only within this fathom-long body that you can find everything you need to know about the nature of reality. And this is where you can turn in somatic investigation, this felt sense. Sometimes it's strong and unmistakable. Oh my gosh, here's this sick, twisted feeling in my guts, like something terrible is going to happen. Or the sense of like, oh, here's this dagger in my heart, or here's this lump in my throat, or here's this burning feeling around my eyes. It'll feel strong. You can sense it. Sometimes when you go into this really deep inner listening, and the listening is like you're listening to a sick child or a pet. They can't tell you what it is, but all you can do is practice intuitive listening. Sometimes you'll listen and you'll feel, and there'll be like a wave or a flicker of feeling, sensation, and emotion, but then it's gone. You can't find it. That's the second quality. Quite often, it'll fall in the category of vague and unformed. Oh, wow, there's something here. There's something really heavy over my heart right now. Or there's something that kind of feels, this is sad. I think this is sadness or disappointment. And as you listen and make room for it, you're really listening. So what's this all about? Is there a sense of what this needs right now? That deep inner attending becomes a powerful part of staying on the wave when you're feeling that wave. And it leads to the possibility of letting go. And I always like to acknowledge Tsoknyi Rinpoche, who had this great line where he said that compassion is the lubrication that allows you to let go. And this leads us to the N of rain, to nourish whatever you find as you're practicing deep listening, calling on loving presence, on empathy, on compassion, and kindness. For some people, having a hand on your heart can be helpful. For some people, those words by Thich Nhat Hanh, where he simply says to say internally, I care about this. To ask what it needs, how it wants you to be with it, and deeply listen. This is all part of slowing down and staying present to what it means to ride whatever wave of resistance you're on at any time. So part of this embodied practice is the practice of calming and gathering your attention, coming back again and again to the here and now. Another quality of the practice is opening to mindfulness, your capacity to recognize what's changing and to explore your relationship to it. Am I pushing it away? Am I grasping? Another aspect of the practice is to be aware of the filter through which you're perceiving. Am I looking through this filter of judgment, of pushing away? Am I looking through this filter of wanting? Am I looking through this filter of anxiety? Am I looking through this filter of kind of a numbing, self-protective energy? Am I looking through this filter of doubt? When something arises, and this is the beauty of Vipassana meditation, it's not just about calming and gathering. Some traditions really focus on that. Just keep coming back to the here and now. Just keep coming back to the here and now. But in Vipassana or insight meditation, when something arises that's really calling for your attention, when you notice you're on a wave of resistance, you can turn to investigate that. Give it a name, sense if it feels okay to be with it, and just sense if you can turn your attention inside and nourish what you find. This is the journey of being deeply with yourself and the body that you have been given for this amazing ride. I was on a plane. This was many, many years ago. And I happened to sit next to this guy, and we were both really into hands-on healing modalities for whatever reason. There was a time in my life when I was passionate about hands-on energetic healing, and I did a lot of study and got lots of certifications, and we're comparing notes to our trainings and what we were learning, and it started to get a little competitive. I had mentioned I was trained in deep tissue, and he goes, "Oh, have you done Rolfing?" I said, well, yeah, actually, I've done this series, and he goes, "Well, yeah, Rolfing is good, but I find the myofascial release really, really interesting." And I was like, "Oh, well, of course, but the deep tissue work is interesting, but I'm actually more interested in the subtle body work." And he goes, "Oh, really? Well, what have you studied?" And so I talked about my training in zero balancing and craniosacral, and how I try to balance it with something more like grosser sensations, such as Traeger work, and we're going back and forth. And it was sort of sharing information, but also this little bit of competitiveness as he's saying his training, I'm sharing my training. And he said, "Well, what about Reiki?" I said, "Oh, well," this is embarrassing. So, well, my mother's a Reiki master. And she actually initiated me into Reiki level 2. I said, "Oh, well, I've received Reiki level 3. And I thought, well, la-dee-da. I went on to think about it. I thought, so Reiki level 2, Reiki level 3, what is the difference? The word Reiki refers to universal healing, universal energy. So you're bringing universal energy to whatever it is that you're focusing on. So I thought, wow, I'm going to train myself into Reiki level 4,000 and see what happens. One of the things that I find interesting, and if you practice Reiki, it's the whole thing around Reiki. There are a couple different schools. There's all kinds of, the Orthodox Reformed Church of Reiki. But in essence, what I've noticed is, and what I really want to talk about in these remaining minutes, is that when you sense something that is between you and feeling free, and you bring awareness to it, and when you bring compassion to it, and you could say maybe this is the universal energy of awareness and loving presence, or bodhicitta, it'll often feel worse before it feels better. And that's an important thing to recognize. That when you are on a healing journey, it'll quite often feel worse before it feels better. For many years, I used to supervise fasting retreats. It would be a week long, and people would be fasting on juices or water, or sometimes just rice. And there was always this thing, kind of like the mid part of the retreat, when I would, greet people as they came in. I'd say, "How are you feeling today?" And someone would say, "Oh, I'm so tired. I'm gassy. My skin feels pasty." And I'd always say, like, "Wonderful. That's fantastic. It's working. You're going through a detox." When you get deeply rested, when you allow the body to begin this healing process, you will begin to detox. You're letting go of what's no longer needed. And I think this is a really wonderful metaphor for a meditation practice. Resting in presence is a detox process. When you come into the present moment, when you allow yourself to relax, when you allow yourself to feel, anything that's between you and feeling free is going to begin to find its way into your consciousness. Whatever arises, you will naturally begin to resist, because there's this initial sense of something's wrong. Something's wrong with me, something's wrong externally. And you'll begin to feel this inner wave begin to form, the resistance. And as you feel the inner resistance begin to form, classically what we do is we get off the wave, we stop the wave, we short circuit that natural process of the wave forming and then releasing. Judgment, ill will, pushing away, grasping, wanting, fantasy, the disassociation into some fantasy world, getting lost in cycles of hypervigilance, worry, anxiety, numbing ourselves, just going numb so we don't have to feel or just take the edge off what we're feeling, getting paralyzed by doubt, getting paralyzed by the inner critic. All of that is happening in the mind, but it's also happening in the felt sense of your body. If it's possible to ask yourself, first a name, okay, what's the hindrance? Name that hindrance. And then ask yourself, can I be with it? Is it okay to stay on the wave? Sometimes it isn't. But if it is, how intimately can you examine and accompany that resistance? How intimately can you hold it in loving presence? And you may notice yourself going through a healing crisis of some kind. It may feel worse before you begin to feel a shift. And there's something about these cycles of healing that the more you go through them, the more you begin to cultivate what's called verified faith or mature faith. You begin to recognize, here comes something really unpleasant. Something in me doesn't want to feel this, but something in me knows that I've done this before, and it's been really powerful. Because there's something, to the degree I'm resisting, there's something on the other side of this if I can find a way to be with it. To my mind, this is one way to look at this process of detoxing, of letting go of what's not you, of letting go of your narrative, letting go of your story, letting go of whatever presents that has some sense that is really calling for your attention. Some of the waves are really little. They're the little annoyances in life. Some of them are really deep. Some of them are ancient. This is a practice of transformation, and it's challenging and it's tough, but then again, what else are you going to do? Why don't we close with a short meditation? If you like, you can close your eyes, or if you're not in a position where you can close your eyes, you can maybe just cast your gaze down for a moment. You might bring your attention to your breath. Take a moment to sense what could relax or soften right now. In your own way, as you just sense everything that's changing right now, can you sense or imagine if just for a moment, is there anything here that doesn't change? Can you sense who you are as the one who is aware? Can you sense your potential for expanding your capacity for joy? To imagine expanding your capacity for kindness and compassion for yourself and for others. And can you imagine the possibility of expanding your capacity to hold a sense of steadiness and presence in the midst of external and internal changes? As you're ready, you can deepen the breath. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you so much for your time and for your attention. And when you feel that wave, if you can in some way in the back of your mind, just sort of say, surf's up. And see where riding that wave might take you. Thank you so much. So many blessings in your practice.